further east. And in '69, I left the country, lived in Greece for 6 months. And it was in Greece that I really began to hear um, what was going on because the folk music of what's called Paros Naxos music in the Kyklades in Greece. They're folk songs, they're beautiful songs, but at the end of every song, there would be the equivalent of what in Arabic music we call taksim, or
Right.
really alap in Indian music, where a violin player or clarinet player would just rhapsodize on on the song, and that has always stayed with me as being a perfect segue. I mean, there I was in the cusp of East and West, in Greece, and that led to just I think it just kind of fueled what became a trip to India and really listening to the music, um, going without a clue of what was really going on, but beginning to study and listen and appreciate, and that's it, really.
Right. And who was your like first formal teacher with Indian classical music or
Well, the first, when I first arrived, I went to India in 1969. We went overland, which was quite an experience. What a wonderful way to really um, just imbibe in culture, a lot of which is from another era. When the Russians moved into Afghanistan in '77, and then the Iranian Revolution, that whole route, which was one of the Silk Roads, um, which had been an active transfer of culture, an interaction of culture for hundreds and hundreds of years, really was stymied. Can't say that it's not there, but it definitely was broken. And when I got to India, I was in Benares, and I wanted to play Shanai, the instrument of Bismillah Khan, because Shanai was the closest thing to
saxophone?
saxophone that
Yeah.
I was playing. And I had a teacher who was from a family. It wasn't from Bismillah Khan's family, although I knew a lot of his nephews that were playing, but it was a Hindu family that was attached to the Maharaja of Benares. And just to not be belabored about this, but it was a meeting of two minds that could not figure out what in the world was going on with each other. Um, this Chennai player, Hiralal, played beautifully, but the only people that he ever taught, the only people he passed on that tradition to, were his children, who just grew up with this whole thing, and that's what they played. And I wanted to play this instrument, did not have a clue about things that any 3-year-old would know that. And
Sure.
at the same time, because I have this kind of jazz ear, I could play things that didn't make any sense to him because no one really should be able to do that unless they've really studied for a long time. So it was kind of a confused situation, and we left Benares. We went down south, where I encountered, for me, the kind of greatest musician that is beyond North and South, T.R. Mahalingam, flute player. And I heard him play, and I at that point I could have said, well, maybe I should just study Carnatic music,
Mm.
but because his music was just, again, as I said, it was beyond North South. It was just celestial music of the gods. This guy, and but I came back north, but inspired to play flute, which I doubled on from saxophone. And I met a flute player in Benares, the man whom my guru in Calcutta was somewhat dismissive of, Chetila Srivastava, who was really a very talented sitar player and bansuri player, who was teaching at Benares Hindu University. And that was my first teacher, really. And then at a certain point, it was time to just move on, and I found myself in Calcutta under circumstances that are kind of a long story in themselves. But it was in Calcutta that I was introduced to Gorn, who was my principal guru.
Yeah. And how do I mean, I imagine, it was a very different Calcutta. How were you received in general in the 70s in India? Were people just astonished by you, or they curious why you'd be interested in the music, or or you're from another planet?
They were definitely curious. You've come from the land of milk and honey to study our music, bewildered. But overall, I would say incredibly supportive,
Mm.
incredibly supportive and moved that somebody would want to settle in there, dig in, and really do riyaz, do practice. Um, and play. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel the generosity of not only my principal teachers but so many musicians along the way um, is is something that I'm so thankful for.
Was there like some kind of mental block or challenge or programming that you had to break through in order to get get a deeper understanding of what raga is really based on? Was
Yeah, I would say I'm probably still trying to break through it.
Sure.
um, I think that's an ongoing process. The music, which, as most of the folks listening know, is oral tradition. It's not what's written down. It's not even what you can put on a tape recorder and memorize. Let's say it has to be absorbed. It has to marinate like food, and um, that's a very mysterious process where um, you have a moment of clarity. Oh, I get it. I really get what's going on, and then no, I mean, one of the stories that I love to tell is that I was sitting with Gorn, and he's playing, um, and he's actually playing Rag Bhairav, which has a flat second, como re, which he's playing for me, and he plays the note, and he says to me, and this is really very early on, he said, "This note is very peculiar," and I go, "Oh yeah, right." I mean, 15 years later, I think, I was playing that raga and I played that note in a certain way and I instantly remembered what he said. It just was self-secret. There's a wonderful Buddhist Tantrayana term, self-secret, which is basically that we we understand things, we can take things in at the right time, in the right place. Somebody could tell you the most profound thing,
Mm.
and if it's not the right situation, the right time, and you're not in the right state of mind, um, that Western mind just goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, right, of course, I know just what you mean." Case closed.
Right.
But and I think many of us who have um, dove into this music from such a radically different culture have had these moments, these aha epiphany moments, where the vastness, uh, that sense of just cradling, a note, a
Mm.
phrase happen, and you just go, I mean, that's you listen to an Indian music concert, and the rasikas, the people that love the music, that's a ba va va kya bate. I mean, but well, and I go, what? Well, what exactly happened? Oh, don't worry about it. you know, but you begin to acquire a sensitivity to that.
Mm. Yeah, kind of a sense of less being more, or doing more with less is probably something less explored in say bebop or or a lot of
Well,
Western music.
yeah. I mean, Indian music is from a Western musical description minimal. It's minimal. There are only five notes or six or seven notes, but that's it. And you just work with that material. And I often think that whereas Western music and the kind of development of Western music has been kind of all about expansion. Like the orchestra from the 17th century through the 20th century kept getting larger and larger. You know, we need more instruments, we need more sound, we need more time. Whereas Indian music I see as being more like working with an electron microscope,
Deeper and deeper.
where you're just going down deep. You're going down deep into one note. I mean, you know, our dear friend Ramakant Gundecha, who passed away this past year, um, would say in Drupad, um, you know, sa, but it's not just one sa. There are like many saws. I mean, it's just like hearing the depth, um, the root of something so deeply, where the overtones come from, where a sense of space around a note uh, can um, can be the emptiness, the silence can actually be heard pregnant with something. This is what this music is marvelous at exploring.
Yeah, I got a question here from Fred Schneider, who asks if you could touch on your work with Glenn Velez.
Yeah, sure. It's funny. I was just talking about Glenn today because we talked earlier. I'm playing with Paul Winter for the solstice at 4:30 in the morning. If any of you are, and it's going to be online. Um, but Glenn, as many people know, is uh, I guess he's the guru, the Western guru of the frame drum um, that he kept developing. And when I played with him, which was from the late '80s on, um, it was an opportunity for me to bring the melodic and structural elements of raga into a world music context. So, for example, rather than having a tambura going on and playing, I'm going to play Rag Yaman, I'm going to play Rag Jajavanti. Um, Glenn would play the drum, and first of all, I became, you know, as many people realize, a frame drum particularly is extremely tonal.
Mm.
It's got its own tone center and its own overtones. So I could find something drawing on raga reference to meet that pitch, and it just led it. I would say Glenn was, you know, certainly one of the most important kind of world music um, collaborators I've ever had a chance to play with. You know.
Yeah, speaking of that stuff, I just revisited the album with Badal Roy and Nana Vasconcelos.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that could you touch on? I mean, I guess we could talk about that period and you're kind of returning to New York with a stronger background in this music than probably just about anyone else who'd come from the West originally. And you start hooking up with Carl Berger and the whole creative
Yeah,
music studios,
right.
and maybe we could just touch on that period and some of that music that you're making then.
Well, this is really an exciting time in New York. I was not really part of the California scene, which was centered around the Ali Akbar College.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in New York, um, there was a sense of this world music um, exploring exploration. Carl Berger, who's in Woodstock Creative Music Studio, um, was bringing together not only the finest jazz musicians in the city. I mean, the studio was really the inspiration of Ornette Coleman and Don Cherry, who persuaded Carl to come to the States from Germany, where he could not be restricted by all the legal rigmaroles to start a school. And at that time in this country, there was funding, there was an ability to really start something fresh. So, but in addition to all of the finest jazz musicians coming there, everything opened up for the world music, kind of a platform for world music. So Nana Vasconcelos came there, Colin Walcott was there, so Trilak Gurtu. Um, and we just really found ways to make music. Adam Rudolph would bring a group in. There were African musicians there, by Kante, and Turkish musicians, Ismet Sorel. And all of this was like a melting pot of music and ideas. But the person, in a way, who's so remarkable as a link between the jazz world and this kind of new form of world music really is Pablo Roy.
Right.
Because what an extraordinary guy. I mean, he came from Pakistan when he was a kid and was amateur tabla player. He's the first person to say, just playing, no traditional training, but what a sense of rhythm. And he's playing in an Indian restaurant in Greenwich Village, and John McLaughlin came in. And the next thing you knew, he was playing with Miles Davis. And he had an uncanny ability to just use tabla in the language of tabla bowls, but swinging, totally rhythmic, in line with a sensibility to jazz musicians like no one else. And and I had this incredible opportunity for a couple of years to play with him, and it was in a way, it was like the Indian guy was the jazz musician, and I was the Western guy coming at it from Indian classical music. and we found a wonderful way to merge those two things, and then we did make this recording with Nana Vasconcelos and Mike Richmond called Asian Journal, which in a way, when I listen to that, that's around 1979 or 80. It's what just opened up things for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Same way as those recordings with Glenn Velez. I mean, I'm really thrilled when I meet a lot of younger musicians that say, "Man, when I was in high school, I heard that, and it just got me wanting to play frame drums or play that music." So there's a real continuity. Now Glenn Velez and Jamie Haddad, the other fabulous hand percussionists, all have actually not just one generation but two generations of really fine students. People playing Matt Kilmer, Shane Shanahan. I mean, people. So there's a legacy of all of that, which has informed what world music is now.
Was the creative music studio? I mean, there was formal classes. Were people registering? Was there a big social element? Like, was it all year round? Like, what was it?
I think I believe it was all year round. Carl, as I said, there was what was called CETA grants in New York State at that time, so there was funding, to run this old camp that Carl was able to buy, the studio was able to buy. And a lot of Europeans could come over because actually it was like much the economy was cheaper in the States than in Europe. So there were a lot of Europeans who came there. I mean, a lot of wonderful musicians came there when they were 17, 18 years old. John Lindbergh, Peter Raffelbaum, these guys that are now, like major players. Um, and and there were structured classes. Carl actually just published a wonderful book called Music Mind, and he was he is such a wonderful teacher in terms of what would you could almost say like the basics of music, but what is music really about? It's not about shredding. It's not about just memorizing notes. It's a sensibility. Um, it's a sense of time. He created the whole rhythmic exercise based on gamelataki, you know,
Mm.
5 syllables. And every morning there would be a rhythmic class where people just sat around in a circle and kind of let um, variations of this 2 plus 3, 3 plus 2 system kind of permeate. So there were classes. I would go up there and teach Indian raga singing as a way to give people a sense of where the scaffolding, the language of raga existed and how they might use it in a jazz improvisation. Um, and then there were a lot of jam sessions, just endless opportunities to play, meet people.
Mm. And Don Cherry was in the mix. He was around.
Don was very much like the godfather of the scene there. Yeah, yeah. Don, I consider one of my mentors for sure. Just in terms of that um, leaning in. Like, okay, you learned this tradition, but don't be afraid to just lean in and play from your heart.
Mm.
Like use it. And then Don and Carl played with Don for years in Germany before they came to the States. And he said that Don would um, spend the day listening to a shortwave radio, um, listening to all this Arabic music. And I mean, they were in Germany, but all these different things. And then he'd come into the club at night and he'd start playing it.
Wow.
And that's what they worked with. So there was that sense of just this vast, large musical world that you could tap, and if you did it with authenticity, your own personal authenticity, it's fine. It was, I mean, it could be good. Maybe sometimes it wasn't what you wanted, but there was a sense of breaking away from this sense of I can only play what my teacher taught me, you know, that kind of thing, which I have total respect for that. But I guess from the jazz side of me wants to be able to find ways to just take that language and allow it to mingle with me, who I am.
Right. Adam Rudolph has passed along something that Don Cherry has said, which might be an extreme version of this idea, where he said, "Style is the death of creativity."
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which, I mean, I'm sure you don't agree with completely, as you've delved very deeply into a style. But
I know. I'm kind of stuck. I mean, I just love playing. My practice is to sit down and play a raga. That's what I really want to practice. But I feel that it gives me the well, like for example, one of the pieces that we're going to do on this solstice concert with Paul Winter, he's got a whole series of large tube um, uh, chimes, you could call them, not really gongs, but large tube chimes that Gary Kvisted from created. And they're sitting there in his barn, and he started playing them, and 3 or 4 of them begin to resonate all together, and I can hear all these overtones, and so it becomes the ground
mm,
for just I'm playing the flute and I'm just listening for the language of those chimes and play a piece with it. and all of those hours, you know, working on raga and everything. I think you bring all that to the table for whatever you do.
Yeah, for sure. Um, One person had a specific question of something about you getting tickets to the Yankee game from Paul Simon, but but maybe we could broaden that into
It's true.
yeah. How did that relationship start with Paul
With
Simon?
Paul,
Yeah.
through Jamie Haddad. Jamie and was one of the percussionists. Still, you know, has worked with Paul for 25 years, and this was in 2000, and Paul was doing a new album, and I mean, clearly since Graceland, I mean, he's always had an ear for music outside of the Western arena, and Jamie, who is, you know, is just marvelous, brilliant percussionist. I guess there was a particular piece. I think that's what it was. It was a particular piece, and he said, you know, you should check out this guy. So we met and came in, and we did this really wonderful piece. It's in 11. I mean, this is like a pop song in 11. That's cool to begin with, um, and it's called "The Teacher." It's on this album, "You Are the One," and we did it. And Howard Levy was on that, myself, and Evan Ziporyn also, with a soloist wrapping around this song that Paul wrote. But in the process of a couple of days with him, I learned that he did yoga every day. So at the last time I was there, I gave him a copy of Luminous Ragas, which has been a popular CD for people doing yoga for a long time. And I was delighted to get a call 2 days later, and ended up playing on about 6 tunes on that album.
Yeah, you actually play the very first notes of that album.
Yeah, the first notes of that.
It's a beautiful, beautiful album.
Yeah.
I love that. We have a comment here that Bill Buchan says, "I was at that game." I guess
Bill was there. Bill came to the Yankees. That was 2 times with Paul, because he was a big Yankee fan. They got a box right.
I don't know if he's going to play.
What's that?
Oh, nothing. I think I'm not doing the best job muting everybody as I should be doing.
Yeah, when I picked up the tickets from Paul's assistant, she said, "You're so close to the field, you can smell their sweat." So, right, Bill?
It's good to be Paul Simon. Yeah. Any other questions from the group? Another one of your notable albums is this one that you recorded in the caves underground.
Oh yeah, with Tony Levin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's you know, I live in Rosendale, New York, and in Rosendale there is a pretty well-known limestone quarry. Cement, until they started working with Portland cement, Rosendale cement was the deal for the skyscrapers in New York. And this quarry was dug into the mountainside, and they actually created a lake so they could barge the limestone out. And it became a wonderful performance spot for a lot of people. I think my first connection of it was with my dear, dear friend Lane Redman, who did a solstice event there, and she, of course, was one of Glenn Velez's prodigies on frame jump. And she came in on this boat in the lake. I mean, like some
goddess
from the medieval world. I mean, it was just amazing. And so we did performances there. And then Tony Levin, who's just a fabulous guy, also local up here, heard about that event and we went down to the cave together, and we recorded this trio record with Jerry Marotta, both of them from the Peter Gabriel world, and very very cool. Just moving around in the cave. It's a great recording to hear with headphones because you really get the
Yeah, it's a binaural recording.
yeah, you hear that. It was a binaural recording that they had. The binaural, for folks don't know, there's a head with two microphones where the ears are, and we would move around the head playing, and you would hear drips of water coming down from the cave.
Wow,
It's quite a wonderful
fun.
project. Yeah.
I got a question here asking you about living with the monkeys in Nirdaban.
That's Bill Buchan must have asked that question.
Yes.
Monkey Flats. Yeah, well, actually, Bill has been my pal for years, and a lot of my interaction in India was with him, and we found ourselves in Brindavan together, living in an apartment owned by his one of his gurus, and we called it Monkey Flats because the humans were kind of behind bars. The humans were behind bars, and the monkeys were free to roam, and that was Monkey Flats.
Maybe that's how it should be. Professor Wang, or G. Prof. Wang, asks what John Schaefer from New Sounds NYC contributed to the scene in generally and your musical life.
Thank you for mentioning John, because he is truly the voice on the radio that opened up the ears of so many people. And New Sounds, 11 o'clock at night. I think I first became aware of the show in the late 70s, when, a year or two after he started. And I called him up, introduced myself. At that time, there were a few people doing Western music, so I got to play on the show and met him many times. And a tremendous, I don't want to say encyclopedia of music, but that's truly what he is, because he just knew everything. And along with John, I would mention Robert Browning.
Right.
And Helene Browning, who started the World Music Institute, or actually the Center for Alternative Culture originally. And this again goes back to 76 or 77, where there was world music every weekend. And we would sit on the floor with Hari Prasad and Shiv Kumar Sharma and Zakir sitting right there, 10 feet away, playing. Hearing that Indian music in the context that it was actually intended to be heard as salon music, not as large concert hall situations, but up close. We had wonderful years, and Robert, of course, brought everyone from the world music stage to New York. So that was a wonderful time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up about how the music was meant to be heard. And I always have this feeling like when I see Raga performed in a large setting, that it often becomes something closer to like a Broadway show,
Right.
And I wonder if you could just, were those shows that or experiences you had with Hari and Zakir G and these guys, was the presentation much different than it would be in today's context?
Well, I had an interesting experience with Hariji, who I have, just so much respect for, and have known for quite a few years. I remember there were two instances where I went to a large hall concert that he gave in the evening, One was in Calcutta. He gave a full concert at night, and then I visited him the next morning in Ramakrishna Mission, and um, and uh, and the way he played in the large concert, I mean, brilliant, but um, it was for everybody. It was for everyone's enjoyment. Um, but the next morning, he asked me, "Oh, what are you working on? What are you playing right now?" And I said, "I'm playing Basant Makari." He picked up his flute, and he's just sitting there on the bed, and I'm in the chair, and it was the most beautiful, deep, soulful music imaginable. And it's almost like you can't do that for the masses. I'm kind of using language that a lot of Indians will say in English, or playing to the galley. You know,
Mm.
it's a different experience. And I heard the same thing in Bombay with him. You know, and I think musicians are affected by the situation. I think it's difficult not to, and this is where I'm kind of a little bit going out on a limb with my personal comments, but I feel that a lot of the music um, of the past 10, 15 years, um, everyone, the audience for sure, but I think the musicians too have been affected by the kind of the speed of the culture that we're living in. Texting, you know, if I don't, you know, it's like no one has time to write a letter. They just write a text. Um, and I think people are playing music that way very often. They just, you know, go right to what's, in many cases with music, what's fast,
Hmm.
what's virtuistic. Um, and I believe it's because a lot of musicians believe that people just won't have the patience or the time or the interest to know, you know, that's like from another world. Although
Right.
now with COVID, it it might be a good time to just
Yeah.
people actually could. In fact, we're experiencing a lot of an opportunity for people to actually slow down. And the heart of Indian music, what I believe is the actual heart and soul of it, is holding space, um, as in a yoga. I mean, a yoga of sound. It's just holding space. It's like allowing every molecule to realign, and that can't happen when things are just going lickety split. You know, no time for this, no time for that. So that's, you know, I feel I was so I feel personally so fortunate to have showed up in India when I did, even as clueless as I was. But I heard some music in an era that was it was really pre-modern. You know, India in the 70s was it's like another world. You know, it was closer to the old world than it was to the new world, and the music reflected that sense of space, of time, um, and nuance.
And do you think that this holding space is something that you've gotten better at, or something that you've kind of learned as time goes on, or like how does that process manifest that a musician gets stronger at that confidence to do
Mm,
so?
yeah, I think I have to remind myself. I mean, very often, you know, my life default is to get up in the morning, make a latte, and sit and play. And in that context, I feel I have access
Mm.
to that um, to all of what I really love and what I've learned. Um, to have that in a more formal concert, um, in a concert, or where there's some pressure for something, or that you have to just hit right on the spot. That's challenging.
Yeah.
That's challenging, and I can certainly be critical of times that I don't feel I've really, kind of met that at that moment. Yeah, yeah.
We got a question here. Someone asks about the Grammy-winning album Miho.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, well, this is Paul Winter, who, as I said, I'm going to play with at 4:30 in the morning on Saturday. Um, he's for those of you that don't know, he's been uh, deeply attached with the environment, with animals for years now, and but mostly the environment and ecology. And there's a kind of you could it's like a sub religion or a sect in Japan called the Shumei people, um, and they have a wonderful mandate for their. They say that their mandate is the arts and ecology.
Hmm.
That's what their statement, their vision is about: art and ecology. And they had a center in Crestone, and they met Paul, and they found him to be a perfect, example musically of what they were up to. And they have an amazing facility built into the mountain outside of Kyoto, with a museum that was built by I.M. Pei into the mountain. I mean, just amazing. And they embarked on a lavish project where they engaged Paul to, it's a collection of Asian art. Basically, the entire museum is a collection of Asian art. And they asked Paul to make music reflecting the various rooms in the museum.
Ah.
So we went over there a couple of times, and this is where I got to play with Juba Ghosh, the just marvelous sarangi player who passed away several years ago, very suddenly and tragically. But Juba and I played in this room with I think it's like a 16-foot high Gandharva standing Buddha. And we basically kind of represented the Indian music in this recording.
Wow.
Along with Glenn Velez, Gene Fries, and a lot of the regular Paul Winter guys. Yeah, so that was it. Yeah.
He's a great example of someone who can hold space.
Yeah.
I'm amazed by people like him and you. I mean, I came up so backwards through music, where I was really mostly like a wedding DJ. So my instinct is to please people within seconds, or they might all go away.
Yeah.
And Paul can comfortably stand there with a soprano sax in his hand and play a note and listen to the reverb in the church for a minute and let it die out. It's amazing that the presence he has.
Yeah. Well, the cathedral, he was talking about that today, that before he connected with the cathedral, he recorded in the barn where we're going to be, which is wonderful. And then they found the cathedral. And being the resident musician there, they subsequently did all the recordings there. And just, a note and that echo and delay does create its own. I mean, you're leaning into the space that is natural.
Yeah. And that's what he does. That's his thing. One last comment here is Pramik Tubbs says, "Om is where the heart is." Can't argue with that.
I can't argue with that at all. He knows.
Yeah, thanks, Pramik. And I think this is great. Oh, there he is. He appeared on screen. I guess we can wrap it up now. Really great. Thanks everybody for following us.
Oh, this is wonderful.
Yeah, this was really
made
great
it this
chat.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, we made it, and thanks again, Steve. I mean, you're really blazed a trail that we're all following right now. So, so thanks again, and more to come.
Thank
And
you.
thank you. Actually, a bunch of people gave donations on VUC. Sue and Wang and Praveen and
That's great. Yeah.
yeah. So
And
thanks,
if anyone is wanting to tune in at 4:30 in the morning to the solstice, you can find the link on my Facebook page, and if you go to Living Music, Paul Winter, you can find it. It starts. We did this at the cathedral for years. Just stunning. The music begins in the dark, but actually he's going to have the cameras taking in the light from 4:30 in the morning outside of the barn. So that's going to be the what everyone experiences. And then at the very end, you'll see us, but we'll be playing, and it should be quite wonderful.
All right, so let's join Steve and Paul. 4:30 in the morning, everybody. I know
that's good. Yeah, it's good time.
Get out of bed, and yeah, thanks for joining us. Lovely to see everybody's faces and be with you all.
Thanks so much, David.
All right, take care, everybody.
Well, thank you all for
McCarthy, thank you.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I can open this all up here.
See some folks?
Yeah, I was. You can all unmute yourself, and we can let this turn into chaos here.
So everyone pick up an instrument right now.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. That's what Don Cherry said. Play your instrument every day.
So true.
Yeah.
Steve, do you ever do anything more with Adam Rudolph's Go Organic Orchestra? Because that was remarkable what I heard a few years back with them.
You know, I haven't, and largely just because I got really more consumed with being upstate and I kept missing rehearsals. But he has done, I think he's got a whole project with the Brooklyn Rock Mass folks.
Sure.